Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at this little tiny itty-bitty game box from Oink Games. Now this game is, if I'm not mistaken, called Hatari in Japan or wherever it is, but is called In a Grove here in the United States, and you can actually get it through BGG right now. But this is a game in which the players play detectives or discoverers trying to figure out which one of the three culprits committed a murder. So real quick, we'll take a look at this little pocket-sized game. We'll see how it plays, and then we'll come back here at the end and get my opinions on In a Grove. So here you can see the components for Hatari or In a Grove setup for a 4-player game. Now this is a very minimalistic game. In this game, each player is playing a detective or something, trying to figure out which one of these three men here murdered this guy. He's dead. So the fact that he's laying down indicates that he's dead. And you'd be a little bit more removed here so you can clearly tell that this is the dead guy. Now each player is going to have their own tile here. So for example, the player that we currently have knows that he has a 6. And once everybody has looked at their own tile, they're going to pass them all to the left. All right. Once they've done that, they're going to look again at their tile and see what he has. So now he knows I have the 7. All right, great. So he's seen 6 and 7. He knows that 2 of the pretty high tiles are out there, and these tiles range from a blank, which is completely blank, I believe it's here right now, to an 8. So there are a variety of different tiles, blank to 8. Now, once you know which 2 you have, you're going to have the option as the discoverer, which is the first player here, to look at 2 of these tiles. So let's say that this player decides to look at these 2. And he sees that we have a 4 and a blank. Now, he knows that the murderer of these 3 guys is the one with the highest value. He knows that he's seen the 6 and the 7, so those aren't in here. That this guy can't be the murderer because he's the blank, and the blank is never the murderer. And that there's a 4 right here. He has no idea what this tile is. He doesn't know what this tile is. However, what he does know is that he has the option to switch 2 of the tiles. So first thing he's going to do is he's going to mark which one he didn't look at. Second thing he has an option to do in the variant game that comes along with this is that he can switch any one of the murderers with the murdered individual. So let's say he doesn't like this 4 here because he thinks it's too close to a 6 and 7. He thinks it's kind of high. I don't know. He has no idea, right? So, or maybe he doesn't like the fact that the blank's in here. So he's going to go ahead and he's going to swap the blank guy with whoever this murdered individual was. So now he knows that the murdered individual is a blank, right? Then finally, he has the option to accuse one of these different people. So he can say, I think that based on what I've seen, the guy that I haven't looked at is the murderer. Okay? So he's going to choose that that guy's the murderer, even though he doesn't know what his number is. Maybe he thinks it's the 8. Maybe he thinks it's higher than a 4. Whatever the case is, but now he's swapped another thing in there, so he doesn't really know what this guy or this guy is. Anyhow. Once he's done with his turn, the next player is going to get to look at 2 of the tiles. However, they don't really have a choice which 2. They get to look at the 2 that this player did not accuse. So in this case, he's going to look at these 2. And now he sees we have a 4 and a 2. Well, that's good. He now knows that this guy is definitely higher than this one, but he still has no idea of what's going on here. So these would get flipped back over after he looks at them. Of course, other players not seeing what he's done. And he's going to choose one person to accuse. Maybe he decides to choose the 4, right? Now, he, of course, knows that he has the 6, so he knows that the 6 isn't out there, and he saw previously that he had the 3. So he has a little bit of information that's different from the first player's. Once he's done, of course, he places his accused marker out and it passes to the next player, who again gets to look at the 2 tiles that the previous player didn't look at. So in this case, these 2. And he sees, okay, we have the 5 and the 2. Now this is important information because the 5 means that the murderer is going to be the lowest value of these 3 guys, when usually it's the highest value. So right now we'd see if we looked at all 3, if the 5 weren't here, let's say that this was the 3, 4 would be the highest value and he'd be the murderer. However, knowing that we have the 5 and the 2, we know that the lowest value out here must be the murderer, and that the lowest value that could possibly be out here is the 2, because the blank never is the murderer. So we now know as this player that this is the murderer. So we'd flip these back over. We would place our marker out to indicate that we're pretty positive that this is the murder. So now we've seen that each player has chosen a different guy, but the last player still has a chance to go. So He's going to look at these two, knowing whatever information he knows, which is, for example, that he has the 8 and that the 7 was passed previously, and he's going to see a 5 and a 4. So he thinks there's a pretty good chance that this is lower than 4. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with this spot as well, and he'll choose what the yellow player chose previously. Once this is done, we're going to reveal. So we're going to show off what these 3 guys are. So we see that we have the 5, the 4, and the 2. Now, if the 5 didn't reverse, the 5 would have been the highest number, but since the 5 reverses the rules, the 2 is now the killer. Both of the players that chose the 2 are going to get their pieces back, with the eye face up, which is good in this case. The players that chose wrong are going to get their pieces back, but they're going to get them face down as liar chips. These liar chips can no longer be played for accusations, and they count as a chip towards losing the game. Now, the game will end in one of a couple ways. Either the players will run out of chips, so a player will have no chips left, that player will lose, and that's actually the secondary losing condition. The primary losing condition is that somebody ends up with 8 total chips, either eyes or liar chips. Now, the way that you get a chip face up that's somebody else's chip is, let's say that 2 players had chosen this as the murderer. The player that chose second, the player that thought that this was the murderer after the second or the first player chose, is going to get both of these chips back, but he's going to get them both on the liar side. So now we'll see that this player has 6 total chips. If this player or any player ever gets to 8 or more chips, they're going to lose the game. Alternatively, if somebody ever gets rid of all of their chips, they're going to lose the game because they've guessed wrong repeatedly, even though they were lucky to have somebody guess after them. So then you would start a new round, taking back all of the pieces, shuffling them together, laying out a new scenario of 3 murderers and 1 murdered individual, and continue on until one player loses the game, and of course everybody else in that case is the winner. Well, there you have it. That is In a Grove by Oink Games. This game is very popular. I see it over social media quite a bit. I see it on BGG, in images occasionally. And of course, I think part of it is the fact that it's foreign and it's just recently hit the market. But more so, I guess there's just a lot of hype over it, and I'm not really sure I get why. I understand that it's a simple tabletop pocket-sized deduction game. I get that, and I get that there's a social aspect to it where you're trying to bluff the other players into choosing the wrong person, or you yourself are trying to choose the right person without everybody else determining that. But I feel like you have very limited options in how to go about that. When it comes down to looking at 2 guys, choosing one of them or one of the the one that you didn't look at to accuse, and then allowing the next player to look at 2 guys. But he doesn't have any choice. He gets to look at the 2 that you didn't accuse. So he may just very well follow along with you and accuse, and then the next one has no option but to look at the same 2 and follow along and choose. And so sometimes you end up in this spiral where everybody chooses the same thing simply because they're not allowed to look at anything else. Now, of course, the information in front of you that you're allowed to look at the beginning of the round modifies this somewhat, because you may have a key piece of information in your knowledge base that somebody else doesn't know. And yes, you can try and utilize this to your advantage to play something out in order to trick somebody, but only if you're early in the turn order. If you're late in the turn order, you have to go for the option of choosing the right person, otherwise you're going to end up with tokens. So turn order plays heavily into this, even if you have more information. Overall, I just don't get it. It's not interesting to me. There's not enough choices for me. It's too light, and that's fine. But overall, I just don't see the appeal in general, and I'm not really sure that I recommend it. If you like really, really light games and you just want a real quick social bluffing game with some deduction, or of course deduction added in, you can check it out. That's In a Grove from Oink Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.